in Houston, Texas. The name Michael Adabo was spoken with a mixture of admiration and respect. Within business and church circles, his reputation carried weight. By the age of 48, Michael had established himself as a success story, a Nigerian immigrant who had transformed modest beginnings into a multi-million-dollar enterprise. His network of used car dealerships stretched from Harris County eastward to Baytown and beyond, employing more than 200 people. Sales associates, mechanics, finance managers, and administrative staff all drew paychecks from businesses that bore his name. Please comment where you are watching us from, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. By 2019, his personal fortune was valued at more than $12 million. He owned a 5-bedroom home in a gated subdivision in North Houston, drove luxury vehicles from his own dealerships, and maintained a 36-foot yacht named the Lego Star, docked in Galveston. Yet those who knew Michael closely described him as remarkably disciplined with money. Colleagues recalled that he was precise in his accounting, exacting in his negotiations, and rarely reckless in any aspect of his life. At Redeemer Baptist Church, where he was a regular presence on Sundays, he had another reputation, that of a quiet benefactor. He contributed a consistent tithe, financed building maintenance projects, and even paid off the church's parking lot repaving bill without seeking public credit. To many in that congregation, he was a model of Christian stewardship, a man who gave generously but without vanity. But Michael's personal life was far more complex. It had been shaped by both tragedy and second chances. Michael's first wife, Grace, died in 2013 after a sudden illness. The couple's children, a 13-year-old son and a 15-year-old daughter at the time, were left in their father's care. Friends said Michael was devastated by the loss, but responded with characteristic resolve. He threw himself into the task of raising his children with the same methodical focus he applied in business. The children attended private schools in Houston, and Michael tracked their grades closely. He made a point of attending school events, speaking often with teachers, and setting strict expectations for responsibility. To those who saw the family from the outside, he appeared determined to keep life structured and secure despite the hole left by Grace's passing. 3 years later, in 2016, Michael remarried. His new wife, Veronica, was 29 years old, nearly 2 decades his junior. She had grown up in Pasadena, Texas, and worked intermittently as a receptionist before meeting Michael at a church fundraiser through a mutual acquaintance. Their courtship moved quickly, and before the year's end, they were married. Veronica moved into Michael's North Houston home. Neighbors described her as personable and outwardly cheerful. She attended community functions, exchanged pleasantries at the gatehouse, and often arrived in late-model vehicles from her husband's dealerships. She wore clothes that reflected Michael's financial standing, and her public demeanor radiated confidence. Outwardly, the marriage appeared conventional, a successful businessman with a younger, attractive wife by his side. But inside the home, tensions began to surface, tensions that would, in time, grow into something lethal. The source of conflict lay in Michael's estate planning. Long before his second marriage, he had established a trust that designated his 2 children as the primary heirs to his businesses and properties. The trust was airtight. Veronica's access to the family's wealth was limited to living expenses provided by Michael. She had no independent control over the dealerships, nor could she withdraw large sums without his approval. For Michael, the arrangement was non-negotiable. He had built his businesses from the ground up and considered the trust a safeguard for his children's future. His view was simple. Their inheritance could not be compromised by the uncertainties of a second marriage. Veronica, however, chafed under the restrictions. To friends, she confided that she felt excluded and powerless. She referred to herself bitterly as a tenant with a title but no authority. She wanted independence and money of her own. She inquired about taking courses at a community college, but never followed through. She dabbled in small business ideas and investments through acquaintances, though none produced significant returns. Each effort seemed half-hearted, undermined by her growing resentment of the financial leash Michael had placed around her. By 2018, those tensions were obvious to friends of the family. Veronica spoke with increasing frequency about her frustrations. Michael, meanwhile, remained unmoved. Whenever she raised the issue of changing the estate plan, his response was blunt. The plan will not change. His priority was protecting his children amid this domestic strain. Michael maintained personal routines that had become part of his life. Chief among them was his practice of weekend voyages aboard his yacht, the Lego Star, docked in Galveston. The 36-foot vessel was his escape to a place where business pressures and family tensions receded against the backdrop of open water. Two men formed the yacht's regular crew. 28-year-old Jamal Reed worked as the cook, and 34-year-old Darnell Cole handled mechanical maintenance. Both had worked for Michael for years, and both understood his expectations. Orderly schedules, spotless upkeep, and above all, discretion. Typically, Michael invited business associates, friends, or fellow church members to join him for these trips. Veronica rarely participated. To the crew, her absence was ordinary. Michael seemed to prefer keeping his leisure time separate from his second wife, but on May 4th, 2019, Veronica insisted on joining him. Michael agreed, though not without remark. To Jamal, he noted that her presence was unusual. That morning, the Lego Star departed from Galveston with 4 people aboard: Michael, Veronica, Jamal, and Darnell. Supplies had been loaded the night before. The Gulf waters were calm. Everything pointed to a routine outing. What followed would ignite a murder investigation that stretched across years, culminating in one of Harris County's most striking criminal trials. From the outset, the day seemed ordinary. Jamal prepared meals in the galley. Darnell checked gauges and systems below deck. Michael sat on the main deck, taking in the view. Around midday, Veronica prepared a thermos of tea. She carried it to the deck where her husband sat, and, according to both crew members, insisted that Jamal and Darnell leave the area. Witnesses later described her tone as unusually insistent. Michael accepted the drink and consumed it. Minutes later, his demeanor shifted. His speech slowed. His posture slackened. He leaned back, remarking that he felt drowsy. At approximately 11:30 a.m., Jamal passed through the deck area. He later testified that he saw Veronica standing close to Michael, pressing against his shoulder with both hands, guiding his upper body toward the railing. Seconds later, Darnell, still below deck, heard a splash. He rushed topside and saw Michael in the water, moving weakly before disappearing beneath the surface. Veronica stood at the rail, calling out that he had fallen. Darnell threw a buoy, but the current quickly pulled Michael under. Neither crew member entered the water. Both cited the rapid disappearance and lack of visual contact. At 11:42 a.m., Veronica dialed 911. Her voice sounded distressed as she reported that her husband had slipped and fallen overboard. The United States Coast Guard responded immediately. Helicopters, patrol boats, and divers launched a 3-day search covering a wide grid. No body was ever recovered. Standard procedure led authorities to classify the case as an accidental drowning. Veronica reinforced that narrative in the days that followed, telling neighbors and acquaintances that Michael had simply lost his balance and fallen. She repeated the account with emotion, portrayed herself as a grieving widow. But investigators soon began to notice cracks in her story. As part of the review, investigators collected items from the yacht. Among them was the thermos Veronica had used to serve Michael tea. Toxicology testing revealed traces of Zopiclone, a sedative medication. Michael had no prescription for the drug. Pharmacy records, however, show that Veronica had obtained a prescription in her own name just 3 days prior to the outing. The testimonies of Jamal and Darnell also raised questions. Both reported that Michael had shown signs of sudden incapacitation after drinking the tea. Both confirmed that Veronica had asked them to leave the deck immediately beforehand. Jamal, in particular, described seeing her pressing against Michael's shoulder before he fell. Meanwhile, Veronica's digital footprint revealed more troubling details. Forensic examination of her laptop and email accounts showed repeated searches in the weeks before the incident. How much Zopiclone to sedate, effects of high doses of sleeping pills, insurance payout after accidental death. Even more telling were her emails to an attorney. She asked about the terms of Michael's $7 million life insurance policy. Specifically, she inquired about what would happen if the body were not recovered. In one draft email never sent, she wrote, If it happens offshore and no remains are found, what is the expected time for funds to be released? Financial records added to the pattern. Within 5 days of Michael's disappearance, Veronica transferred $50,000 from a joint account into an account under her maiden name. She also contacted Continental Assurance, the insurer, 2 weeks after the incident to inquire about her entitlement to the policy. By late 2020, the pieces formed a coherent picture. Veronica had motive in the form of financial gain, means in the form of sedatives, and the opportunity aboard the yacht. The Houston Police Department reclassified the case from accidental drowning to homicide. Detective Jennings and Tate, assigned a homicide division, conducted new interviews with Jamal and Darnell. This time, the men spoke under oath. Both reiterated their earlier observations. Jamal, however, added a detail he had omitted initially, that he had seen Veronica apply pressure to Michael's shoulder, pushing him toward the railing. He admitted he had been reluctant to say so before, fearing he would not be believed. With their testimony strengthened, detectives pursued warrants for Veronica's devices and accounts. The digital forensics reinforced the narrative of premeditation. Pharmacy records tied her directly to the sedatives. Internet searches revealed planning. Financial movements suggested anticipation, and the insurance inquiries demonstrated clear intent. By January 2021, Jennings and Tate presented the case to the Harris County District Attorney. A grand jury was convened. Testimony was heard from both crew members, toxicologists, Coast Guard officers, and digital forensic experts. After deliberation, the jury returned a true bill of indictment for first-degree murder and insurance fraud. On January 14, 2021, Houston police arrested Veronica at the North Houston residence she still occupied. She was taken into custody without incident. The trial of State of Texas versus Veronica Adabo opened in March 2022 at the Harris County District Court. Prosecutors built their case methodically. A toxicologist testified that the thermos recovered from the yacht contained zopiclone, and that ingestion could cause drowsiness, impaired motor function, and slowed reflexes, consistent with the symptoms described by witnesses. Coast Guard officers described the calm conditions at sea that day, contradicting the idea that rough water had caused Michael to fall. They also confirmed the exhaustive search effort that failed to recover his body. The most critical testimony came from Jamal Reed and Darnell Cole. Both described Michael's sudden incapacitation after drinking the tea. Jamal testified that he saw Veronica push against her husband's shoulder, sending him toward the railing. Darnell corroborated the impaired condition and testified that Veronica was the only person near the rail when Michael went overboard. The defense argued that the case was circumstantial. They emphasized the absence of a body, claiming there was no definitive proof of homicide. They framed Veronica's internet searches as related to her own sleep issues. They suggested the crew members exaggerated their observations to shield themselves from blame. But under cross-examination, Jamal and Darnell stood firm. Jamal explained that his delay in reporting the push came from fear, but insisted on its truth. Prosecutors highlighted that toxicology, pharmacy records, internet searches, and financial transactions all independently supported their testimony. In closing arguments, the prosecution laid out the sequence: acquisition of sedatives, financial motive, opportunity aboard the yacht, corroborating witnesses, and Veronica's immediate attempts to access insurance benefits. The jury deliberated for less than a day. On April 5, 2022, they returned a unanimous verdict: guilty of first-degree murder and guilty of insurance fraud. Judge Linda Marquez presided over sentencing. She cited the premeditation and financial exploitation as aggravating factors. Veronica Adabo was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. She was remanded into state custody immediately after sentencing. Following the trial, the court addressed Michael's estate. His 2 children, now young adults, inherited control of the dealerships under the terms of the trust he had established years earlier. In a victim impact statement read aloud in court, Michael's son delivered words that captured the family's sense of closure. She thought she could buy our father's life and erase us. Instead, she erased herself. The empire Michael had built, his businesses, his wealth, his legacy remained intact, secured by the various state plans. That had sparked resentment in Veronica. The case of Michael and Veronica Adabo became a cautionary tale in Houston's business and church circles. It was a story about ambition, control, and the corrosive power of greed. Michael had built everything with careful planning, discipline, and foresight. He had protected his children's future through legal safeguards. But what he could not foresee was that those very safeguards would fuel resentment strong enough to turn his second marriage fatal. The Gulf of Mexico kept its silence. Michael's body was never recovered, but the evidence, digital, financial, pharmaceutical, and testimonial, left little doubt about what had occurred on the deck of the Lego Star that calm spring morning in 2019. And so, the man who had come to Houston as an immigrant, who built a business empire, who raised 2 children through tragedy, and who gave quietly to his church, met his end not by accident, but by betrayal. Please like, comment, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Thanks for watching.